Welcome to part 2 of step 1. So last video we talked all things distance. This video we're going to talk all things midpoint. So hopefully midpoint is kind of a giveaway what it means, right? Mid meaning middle. So midpoint is exactly in the middle of our line. Okay? So if we're looking at a line, we know locations, like on a number line or something, we can find the midpoint by basically taking the average of the two values. Okay, you might have also heard average be used as the mean. Either way, we're still adding those two numbers together and then dividing it by 2. So in this first example, we're trying to hang a picture that's 15 inches from the left side of a wall. How far from the edge of the wall should she mark the location for the nail when we want to hang it? The right is 37.5. So we're trying to find the middle between 15 inches and 37.5. So to find the exact middle, we are going to find their averages. So 15 plus 37.5. Whatever that sum is, we're going to divide by 2. So 15 plus 37.5 is 52.5. Divide that by 2, and we get 26.25. We have units here, so we're going to definitely want to label those as inches. Okay, so we would want to hang it 26.25 inches from the wall. Let's go ahead and leave that one in case we need to come back to it. So sometimes, just like when we did our distance formula in the graph, we might have points in the graph where we want to find the midpoint. Where are we exactly in the middle? If we wanted to draw, I don't know, maybe like a median, but that will come down the line. So notice it's a similar equation, but this time we have to find the midpoint of the x-coordinates and the midpoint of the y-coordinates. So we have an extra step because we can't jumble up the x's and the y's. We got to keep them separate. So we got to basically do it twice. Okay, so if we have m, we have s is at -6.3, t is at 1.0, and we're looking for the midpoint. So our x's, remember our x's always come first. So -6 plus 1 over 2, and our y's are second. So that is what? 3 plus 0 over 2. So -6 plus 1 would be -5. And then this really can't be simplified. So if you want to leave it as -5/2, that's okay. If you are more of a decimal person, this would be -2.5. Again, both equivalent answers. Not going to be a stickler about that. 3.0 is 3. 3 divided by 2. Again, can't be simplified. So if you want to, I guess you could put it as a mixed number if you want, or you could put it as just a positive 1.5. So midpoint is just describing a location. So it's okay that these are like the 2.5 is a negative value. It's only distance that cannot be negative. So m is at, remember x's always come first. And there's our coordinates, right? We got to put it back together and give the actual coordinates of m. Okay? What else? Okay, so this is a fun new word. Segment bisector. So a midpoint is actually a segment bisector. Okay, segment, we know that, right? Defined length with endpoints. Bisector, if you bisect something, you cut it in half, but you cut it in half so perfectly that it actually makes two halves. Like if I gave you back to that candy bar reference, right? We had it broken up into pieces that were not always the same size. But when we bisect something, we make it to where they are equal exact pieces, okay? And the one way you know that things are congruent to each other, I forgot to mention before, is we have these little tick marks here. Okay, they're not very dark on this picture. But if we see those tick marks or we know that things are congruent, we can label them with those tick marks there. Okay, so example 3. Find the coordinates of J if K is at -1, 2, and it's the midpoint of JL, and L has the coordinates of 3, -5. All right, so let's draw us a picture. So we have, it says, the segment JL. Oh, that's not good at all. We have this, so we have JL. We know that K is the midpoint, it says. K is the midpoint. So we're going to put that as close to the middle as we can. So similar drawing in the last video when we were doing distance. So this time we know that K is at -1, 2. And we know L is at 3, -5. If you wanted to pull out a coordinate plane and actually graph this, by all means, feel free. It's not asking us to graph it, so we can still solve it by hand without needing the visual, but if you need it, go ahead. So it looks like this time, instead of having the endpoints and finding the midpoint, we're actually missing one of the endpoints. So that kind of creates a predicament there for us. So let's say J, instead of just not knowing what it is, right, it's an unknown, let's just call it X, Y. That way we have something to put there, but it's a variable that it's unknown because we don't know what it is. So in the past, like in the last video, we took the two endpoints and we added them together and we divided it by 2. So let's still do that. So let's start with our x's. There we go. So our x's, right? Our two x's are x and 3. So let's add those together and divide by 2. So usually we would have these as values that we could add and divide and we'd get a number. Obviously we don't have that, but we know what the x coordinate of the midpoint is. It's -1. So we can set this equal to -1 and then we can solve. Okay. We can multiply both sides by 2, right, to get rid of that fraction. So then we have x plus 3 equals -2. Subtract 3. And we get -5. And then we're going to do the same thing for our y's. Okay, our y's are y plus a -5 over 2 equals the y coordinate of our midpoint, which is 2. So we're going to start out the same way. Let's go ahead and multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that fraction. So the top here, right, the 2's would cancel. So y plus a -5 is really just y minus 5, right? When we have a plus sign and a minus sign, the minus sign is stronger and takes over. And then equals 4. Add 5 to both sides. And our y coordinate is 9. So, what did we call? J. We need J. So we can write our final answer. J is at -5, 9. All right. I think this is the last one. Yes. Okay, so last one. It says find the measure of PQ if Q is the midpoint of PR. Okay. So in the past, when we were finding distance formula, in the past meaning the last video, I know that was so long ago, we were usually given PR, right? We could do PQ plus QR equals the whole thing, add them together and set it equal. But we have an issue here because we don't know what PR, but we know that Q is the midpoint. So remember, when it's the midpoint, it's in the exact middle of the segment, which makes these two pieces here that it's created now equivalent or congruent, okay? So because they are congruent, we know that PQ is actually going to be equal to QR, right? They're the exact same. So PQ is 9y minus 2. QR is 14 plus 5y. And now we've set up our equation and we can go ahead and solve. So let's subtract 5y. We got 4y minus 2 equals 14. Add 2. divide. It's okay if you are doing some of this in your head and you don't necessarily need to show all the work. That's okay. I just show it so in case maybe I talked too fast or wrote it down too fast, you can see what I did. Okay, so let's just make sure. So we found that y is 4, and it actually wants us to find PQ. So we're not done just yet, okay? We know that PQ, it told us, was 9y minus 2. We can't leave that expression because now we know what y is, right? Y is 4. And 9 times 4 is 36. 36 minus 2 would be 34. So this is kind of a two-part answer. So like on an assessment, if you forgot to find the PQ, you'd still earn the points for the Y part of it, but you would lose points there. But we already know that we did both, and we are finished. So that is step 1.